Hello, friends. Welcome to Untitled Monastery. I'm Maya Soma, and I'm here with Bhante Sudaso. Tonight we will be answering any questions you might have on Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha or related approximately to Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. And welcome to Cheetah, Sud, good to see you, Patricia, Geeta, Rick, Jayanta. To see you online, Jayanta. Hopefully we'll see you also live, as in person soon, since the monastery is open. Sam, good to see you. Kumu, Anumadana Sadhu for your dana today, and Aislinn. Today and yesterday, yes. Yep. And Aislinn, good to see you. And Jen, all right. Welcome to all our friends. So whenever you're ready, feel free to type in any question you might have, and we'll try our best to answer it. And in the meanwhile, if the residents also have any questions, you're welcome to ask them now. Hello to Jack as well.
There were many very interesting questions from yesterday, so hopefully those will get added today.
Do we remember any?
Oh, here's a question.
So Jerry asks, in the Anapanasati Sutta, one of the instructions is to breathe in and out, freeing the mind. Freeing the mind from what exactly? Bhante?
Well, one way that this is explained is freeing the mind from the 5 hindrances. So the reason for this is because the instruction freeing the mind is not the final step of the Anapanasati Sutta. So it can't be referring to final liberation, but rather it seems to be referring to freeing the mind in a more preliminary way. So the usual explanation is it's freeing the mind from the 5 hindrances, which then allows the mind to do the deeper practices of the final tetrad. So if I recall correctly, freeing the mind, vimochayang chittang asasisamiti, that's step number 12, step number 12. And then after that, we get into the contemplation of impermanence and dispassion and cessation and relinquishment. So first preparing the mind with freeing it from the 5 hindrances so that it's capable of doing this very precise, subtle insight practice of the last 4 steps. Any thoughts on this?
No, I think that's good. Thank you, Bhante. And Hawk says, in meditation, do you recommend counting the breath or just silently observing the long, short, and medium breaths? Well, maybe since it's fall, maybe you can elaborate, Bhante, since you already started talking about it.
So counting the breaths is sometimes taught as an introductory practice for people who are very new to mindfulness meditation and have a very difficult time paying attention to their body. So counting the breaths can be a way of starting to train oneself to actually pay attention to the sensations of breathing. And sometimes if your mind is extremely active, you have lots of thinking going on, then sometimes counting the breathing can be a way of helping to soothe the mind. But once you start to get a bit of experience with mindfulness and concentration, then it's not recommended to do internal verbalization because that will prevent the mind from going into deep concentration. So again, these things are okay when you're new to the practice, and by new I mean the first several years. And it's also okay when your mind is very busy, if you're having a really hard time settling the mind down. But generally speaking, you will get your best results by letting the mind be silent and focusing on being completely alert to the sensations of the body. So I don't personally teach breath counting, but it is something which is commonly taught as an introductory method.
Do you want to complete the?
Yeah.
Do you recommend observing the breath only at the nose or following it throughout the entire body and back out through the nose?
I recommend neither. I recommend pick some place in your body where you are centering the mind, so holding the mind still at. So that can be at the entrance of the nostrils. That's commonly taught as a place to use. And for some people, that works really well. But anywhere in the body is actually perfectly fine. The abdomen is actually a very common place to center one's attention. And I find that, for me, that was always much more effective than the tip of the nose. Another place that people sometimes use is the torso. So near where the heart chakra would be in the yoga system. That's also can be a good place to watch the breath sensation. But ultimately, it actually doesn't matter. I actually recommend to do what the Buddha said, which is to feel your entire body, but not moving the mind through the body, but just feeling the whole body, kind of like the body is a balloon. So as you're breathing in, the balloon is inflating. As you're breathing out, the balloon is deflating. So just feeling the body as it inflates and deflates with each breath. Feeling the whole body. If you fixate too much on one single point to the exclusion of everything else, then that can actually weaken your mindfulness. You can become very mindful of one tiny little pinpoint, but have zero mindfulness of the rest of your body. So that can actually lead to blacking out, which is not samadhi, by the way. Contrary to what some people believe, blacking out is not samadhi. It's actually a sign that your mindfulness is disappeared. So you want to make sure that you're fully, clearly, intensely aware of your entire body, but without moving the mind around. This is how you get the best samadhi. Okay?
Thank you, Bante. And Michael is asking, how has the Reins retreat affected your practice? Many ways. It was a beautifully long retreat, although it's never too long. I wish it lasted longer. So personally, it was very interesting. Every month it was interesting in a different way. January in a particular way, February in another, and March in another. But mainly, well, February I actually left the monastery, so I went practicing. I mean, not left as in for good, but I went to practice for a month, lay retreat center actually, and it was a really interesting experience because I had never really, well, I had never even gone for a weekend retreat in a lay center, so definitely a month is a long time to be in a different non-monastic environment. And yeah, it actually made me become experientially aware of how important and supportive it is for a monastic to live in a monastery with other monastics. The support of the Sangha, the support of actually also the support of the lay people. I was really missing Buddhist lay people because it was a very secular place, so there were no Buddhist lay people, and it was almost like practicing without a limb in a way. So of course we practice with whatever condition there is, but if all our limbs are there, like if the leg is there, it's more comfortable to sit, and it's very supportive for everything, for developing sila, samadhi, and panya. So that was very interesting to notice how after a while the mind tends to take really precious and good things for granted, and then when they're not there for different reasons, there can be a bit of a shock. So yeah, very important also to see how when conditions change, we have different results in the mind. So I developed new skill sets on how to actually still have still keep the supports of the monastic life in a place where that is not designed to welcome monastics. So that was definitely a skill set that I gained, and also an appreciation for Empty Cloud Monastery and all the people that I live with, and the Sangha members and the fourfold Sangha, essentially. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Another thing was that I got an injury that seems to be very affectionate now to my body and doesn't want to leave. So that was another point of struggle during this retreat, because actually most of the time I had to sit in a chair, and I had never really sat on a chair. So I remember when we went to Daibosatsu Monastery, that is in the Japanese Zen tradition, upstate New York, and Shinge Roshi, who is the abbot there, she was giving instructions to a group of people, and she was going step by step, and so she's like, well, the easiest position like for posture is the lotus position, and then the intermediate is just sitting cross-legged, and then the most difficult position is sitting on a chair, and everybody was laughing, and we're like, oh, she's very funny, Shingeroshi. And this retreat, I was like, wow, this is really difficult to sit on a chair for long periods of time, for long retreat, and actually have develop samadhi. So the joke actually became the joke on me. So I never actually developed, before the injury, I never put too much effort in developing the skill sets to sit in full lotus. So when actually just sitting cross-legged wasn't available to me, made me go like, maybe I really want to pursue, once I'm healed, I want to pursue the easy position, because actually it's really supportive to practice just sitting cross-legged in the traditional way. So another appreciation, of the tradition of Buddhism that has been passed on from Asia. So this was long story, extra long. Bhante, do you want to share your thoughts on the retreat?
Yeah, I mean, the main thing is flexibility of mind, the importance of flexibility of mind and flexibility of practice. I was actually just talking earlier with Anagarika Jens about how we can be used to meditating in a particular way and getting used to having good results from using a specific technique. And then Monday, it just doesn't work. You sit down and you try to do the method that you're used to doing and used to getting good results from, and it's just not working. And what are you going to do? You try something different, of course. That's what you do. You make your practice flexible and adaptable. If your meditation method is too rigid, then of course you're going to run into situations where it's not working. So yeah, that's actually what for me was really coming up during our winter retreat. Was I remember the first few days I was trying to meditate in a particular way, and it just really wasn't working. And I was like, I'm just going to keep doing this and keep doing this. And after a few days, I was like, I just had to admit to myself, like, this isn't working. I gave it a good solid try for a few days, and it just wasn't working, even though I'd always had very good results with that method in the past. So then I changed what I was doing, and things got much smoother after that point. So that was for me the really big thing, was just this reminder once again of the importance of a flexible and adaptable meditation practice, and not getting too caught in a rigid concept of how we think we should be meditating, but to be open to changing the method that we use whenever it's suitable to do so.
Thank you, Bhante. And Sud says, dear Venables, from your own practice, do you have any advice as to how to practice right verbal conduct with fidelity and without failure At least perhaps ensuring minimizing failures. I'll let you know when I've accomplished that. But yeah, with practice, essentially. No excellence can be acquired without constant practice. So we need to allow ourselves to make mistakes along the path and learn from our mistakes. So not pretend that we're perfect, but also not expect ourselves to be perfect. It's kind of a balancing act. And yeah, following the teachings of the Buddha, essentially, first of all, it's not only sufficient for something to be true in order for it to say. So, like, essentially, you want to stop before saying anything and contemplate. Is this true? Okay, first stop. We acknowledge that it's true. If it's false, that's it. It's the end. But if it's true, then the other question is it beneficial? Very, very important. Like, is anyone going to have any benefit from what I'm about to say? So if it's beneficial, then we take it into consideration. If it's not beneficial, we shut up. Then, third one, I always struggled with this one. Is it the right time? And the right time is not the right time for you. Bante is smiling because he was very patient. He used to say everything. It was true. Definitely, in my opinion, it was beneficial. In my opinion, it was the right time. But yeah, neither of these were the qualifications that the Buddha was talking about. And definitely, it was not said with a mind of loving kindness, which is another prerequisite. So even if everything is true, beneficial, it's the right time, you have to actually have a mind of loving kindness while saying it. So if you're angry, no bueno, like zip it, which is very difficult, especially in the heat of the moment. We tend to overlook it. It's like, oh, how many? Like, I think, yes, yeah, 3, I got it. And then there's lots of dosa instead of metta. And then, is it said gently? So you have to have these 5 factors in order to speak, to say anything. But it's just difficult. That's why it's called Buddhist practice. It's not called Buddhist pill. I wished that would be really great, right? So we intellectually understand it. We then learn the Dhamma, and we see, and we're like, wow, okay, yes, Oma, you don't always get 5 out of 5, but you also not get 1 out of 5 like you started. So there is clearly a progress, right? Sometimes you get 2 out of 5, 3 out of 5, 4 out of 5. Rarely 5 out of 5, but before it used to be 0 out of 5. No, 1 out of 5. I used to say the truth. That was past karma, probably. But all the rest, it was really very difficult. And it still is, especially because usually we're not like dying to tell people nice things, all the time. So usually the things that we struggle with the most are the ones that require a little bit more care and a little bit more of intentional development of metta and kindness, because we tend to go like, I don't like this, I don't want this, but give me more of whatever goodness that you're doing, right? We take that for granted. We don't, as Venerable Robina Cortin encourages us to think about. We never go to the therapist, for example, to ask them, oh, why, did I get a job that is really great? Or why did I get a promotion? Like we're like, or why do I have so much money in the bank, for example? We don't do that. We're like, yeah, of course, I should have all this money in the bank. And of course I should have all these good things. And of course my siblings should be good and kind with me. But we go, on the other hand, to ask, oh, why are the things that we don't like and all the things that don't go wrong? Those we have many questions for. Anyways, so that's, do you want to add anything, Bante?
I might just add just briefly, another very important thing is admonishment from other people. So if you want to get better at right speech, well, ask the people around you what you're doing wrong with your speech. Because often they'll point out things to us that we didn't realize we were doing incorrectly. So it's very important to be open to receiving instruction from others.
Sadhu, thank you, Bante. And Shadow of Label asks, is it possible to do all the meditation stuff while thinking and moving about in daily life and solving problems? Would you like to address that?
No. You cannot do all the meditation stuff while thinking and moving about and solving problems, but you can do some of it. And also keeping in mind that Buddhist practice is the Noble Eightfold Path. So that, I mean, technically, I guess you could call all of it aspects of meditation. Right speech is an aspect of meditation. Right action is an aspect of meditation, because meditation is training the mind. It's cultivating wholesome mind states. So you should be doing that all the time anyway. But there are certain things which you can only really develop through formal meditation practice. And there's other things which you can't actually really develop during meditation. You have to develop it through activity. So no, you can't do all the meditation stuff while moving around. But you can cultivate mindfulness, compassion, equanimity. You can practice right effort, right livelihood, right action, right speech. You can do all of those things.
Great. Thank you, Bante. And Charles Lee says, why didn't the Buddha emphasize vegetarianism if one of the precepts was not to kill sentient beings? What is the householder who raises and kills alpaca or chicken to feed her family to do? It's a little bit extreme, your two cases scenarios. Like, either you're a vegetarian or you start killing sentient beings. So there are actual also people who eat meat that don't necessarily kill alpaca or chicken or any sentient beings. But to address, and actually there can also be people who just kill just for the sake of killing. Hunting, for example, is a sport that not necessarily people who kill sentient beings will eat them afterwards. So it's very, very important to distinguish the two things. The householder who raises and kills alpaca or chicken to feed her family to do, so she's a woman, I assume, the householder. But she, he, or they should stop killing sentient beings and get another livelihood in order to follow the teachings of the Buddha. So if you want happiness and you dislike suffering, the first precept is to stop killing. And also right livelihood is a factor of the Noble Eightfold Path. So we can't get around it. There's other ways through which we can essentially live. We can get our requisites. In terms of the Buddha emphasizing vegetarianism, is once again that as the Tibetan Rinpoche, that I need to remember the name, because I am quoting him quite a lot these days, but I don't remember who said this. But essentially the invitation of reflecting more on what comes out of our mouth rather than what comes in our mouth, which is very related to actually what Sud was saying earlier. So a lot of times when we talk about food, first of all, it comes from a lot of privilege that is, either that we live in a particular part of the world these days, or in a lot of parts of the world in this time and age. But up until, a few decades ago, throughout actually the world, East, West, and everything in between, the food preference was food. So essentially, whatever was available, people were eating. And definitely there weren't, for example, supermarkets, I don't know, in the Alps.
Alternative.
Yeah, or vegan meat alternatives, but supplements, etc., etc. But also in certain places, like, for example, Tibet, good luck at growing anything that is a vegetable, where, it's just the nature of things. Things don't really, you throw a seed in southern India and like everything 50 plants grow from one seed. But in other places, in other localities, the agriculture was essentially based on animal products. So it was the same also in certain parts of Europe, like Northern Europe. Nothing really much grows, or very few things grow, but it's mostly, in fact, traditionally very heavily animal-based sort of nutrition. In Southern Europe, in the Mediterranean, everything grows. So naturally, the diet of people there was mainly vegetarian, actually, with the occasional meat. So yeah, essentially, if the Buddha had focused on essentially what we're introducing in terms of food, well, it would have been a lot more difficult for Buddhism to spread. Definitely, there would be no Tibetan Buddhism, which is quite sad, no? It's quite a great contribution, right, to all sentient beings. And also essentially because monastics originally, we take vows of poverties, and as they say, beggars can't be choosers. So we take whatever is given to us. Obviously, if people are there telling us, like, we're going to slaughter an animal for you, we actually are required to say no. But if it's their leftover chicken, it's totally okay. And actually, we're allowing them to make merit. So it's really what we're emphasizing that is important in Buddhism. And the Buddha is emphasizing not rites and rituals, thinking that by, just eating some particular food, then you're going to be pure or better than others. But rather, it's what are the states of mind that we're cultivating before, during, and after, whether we are on the receiving end or in the giving end. So that's more what's important. That's the liberation that, the tools that we use for liberation. Have anything, Bante?
No, that was very thorough.
Okay, thank you. So Christopher, maybe I'll pass you Christopher, who's very detailed. Greetings. Previously, you mentioned on opinions and views, which means in this world there is no truth. Sutta Nipata 4.12. There is no thing called truth in the world. There are only views. If truth is one and no second exists, debates will never arise among folks. A variety of truths they themselves do form. Gurus therefore never spoke of one truth. Never was there a variety of truths other than sensations perpetuating in the world, creating views using speculative logic, guru speak, etc. Meaning anything outside is subjective reality. Likewise, anything inside is objective reality. Truths are subjective reality. The word Dhamma in Pali or Dharma in Sanskrit simply means experience. So all along, Lord Buddha was teaching his subjective reality.
Stop thinking. You're just twisting your mind into knots and making yourself miserable. Stop. Just practice Satipatthana. So people like you are exactly why Satipatthana retreats exist. Because you need to learn how to stop thinking and just pay attention to your body, let your mind be silent and alert, and see all things as impermanent. That's all you need to do. Stop all this thinking and speculating. It's not doing you one bit of good. So you can spend all day long hypothesizing about one truth or two truths or many truths or objective reality or subjective reality, and just stop. Feel your body. It's this big bloody chunk of meat right here. It's not in all these imaginative thoughts you're having. It's this physical reality right here. This is why Zen masters hit people with sticks. Like, you need to get out of your thoughts and feel your body. It's right here. Okay, next question.
Thank you, Bante. Patricia asks, please share some words on the first of the 7 factors of awakening, especially on recollecting the teachings to steady the flow of consciousness and help focus awareness. Bante?
Well, the first one is mindfulness, but I'm wondering if Patricia is actually asking about Dhammavichaya, because that seems to be the topic.
Yes, I think I was thinking about the same thing.
So I think this is your question. I just answered one.
Oh, but it was short, Bante. I gave a long answer.
It's still your turn.
All right. Recollecting the teachings to study the flow of consciousness and help focus awareness. Well, it's kind of like the opposite of your brief Dhamma talk. But it's actually worth pointing out that, yeah, essentially during the practice of during this Dhamma-vichaya, essentially discrimination of different states is preceded by mindfulness, by sati. So one needs to be, first and foremost, has to have developed mindfulness in order to go to the second step. So I think what Bhante Sudaso was once again suggesting, when we are too much wrapped up in the intellectualization of the teachings, we start creating a lot of papancha, a lot of like blah, 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 that is not useful. And the Buddha, in fact, actually encourages us to reflect of how this essentially creates a lot of dukkha and a lot of like reinforcement of all the conditions that create suffering. So the sense of self, the vipallasa that essentially have the distortions of views. So seeing what is impermanent as permanent and so forth. So instead, we need to always go back to the teachings of the Buddha that are the Four Noble Truths. So the teachings of the Buddha are, this is suffering, this is the cause of suffering, there is an end of suffering, and this is the way out of suffering. Now we first need to understand how suffering manifests in the mind. And we do that by, of course, developing mindfulness, but also essentially understanding experientially how suffering manifests in the mind. And so analyzing our experience, analyzing the different thoughts that appear in the mind, or the different sensations that appear in the mind, and looking at the hindrances, befriending the hindrances. Sometimes we like sit down, and not sometimes, all the time, sit down and there's lots of thoughts of sensual pleasure, even if we're not sitting down. Actually, if we just like go around and take a walk in the park and like, look at all these like beautiful things, I want this, or I dislike this, I don't want this, right? Or we're like, I don't know, maybe I'll just space out and completely like obscure everything from it. Or we're like, I don't know, why am I even at a monastery to begin with? Or why am I doing this Buddhism? I remember, in Italy, it was actually quite pleasant. I was in the Amalfi Coast and I could buy like all these things, like lots of doubt can come. And I'm missing one hindrance.
Kamachanda, Vyapara, Tinamidda, Vichikicha.
Restless. Yeah, and all of this, and restlessness and thank you, Bhante. Restlessness and remorse. So we are either like, or or like, oh, I said that, or like, we don't keep the precepts. So we're like, I'm terrible, I've done this, and we have all these flashbacks from the past. So it's like this torment. And we expect, just because we've read a book or learned something, that we sit down and everything is like peaceful and we're Google images of meditation. And so we start fighting all these hindrances, thinking that we can actually control them. And what happens is actually quite the opposite, usually. We kind of basically keep feeding the monster, which becomes larger and larger and larger, and sometimes can even devour us. So that instead is an opportunity whenever we are experiencing a hindrance to understand how it's dependently arisen. So getting back to the teachings of the Buddha, if everything is anatta, is impersonal, what does that mean? What are the implications in my life? And so also when we have like, thoughts of sensual pleasures, thoughts of hatred, thoughts of delusion, we can start contemplating like the Buddha does, like the Buddha did actually when he was an unenlightened bodhisattva, just like us, and reflect, is this beneficial for me? Is this beneficial for others? Is this beneficial for myself and others? And in this way, actually, we start understanding better on an experiential way what is kusala and what is akusala. And in that way, we're investigating our reality, our experience. And then we're befriending the hindrances, not in the way that, like, please come, like we're sit down and feed you, but rather we are befriending them in the sense that they become a tool for us to understand the mind. The Tibetan word, if I remember correctly, for meditation is gom, which means essentially familiarizing ourselves with the mind. And this is the practice of meditation. We want to understand what the hell we're dealing with. What is this monster? We have no idea, like, what this monster is. Monster of greed, hatred, and delusion. Let's look at it. And the hindrances essentially create, our expressions of this monster. So we want to learn and understand. So I hope that answered somewhat your question. I don't know if Ante, you have anything to add?
No, that was good.
Okay. And Niranjan says, we're a combination of 5 aggregates, 1 rupa, and 4 namas. If we feel verbally and practically, then we are an arhat.
So mindfulness of body and mind is the beginning, but that alone is not sufficient to become an arhat. So first is becoming aware of body and mind. So the 5 aggregates is one of the frameworks that the Buddha offers for developing awareness of body-mind. But then it's necessary to perceive it as anicca, dukkha, anatta. So to deeply feel the impermanent, insubstantial nature of body and mind, to deeply feel the inherently unsatisfactory nature of all physical and mental experiences, and to clearly perceive that it's all an impersonal, causal process, just part of nature. So this body-mind is no different from the trees outside. It's just an expression of nature, a natural phenomenon, which we mistake as being me. So then you can be an arhat. So being aware of body and mind is the first step, but it's very important that you then also recognize the anicca, dukkha, anatta of the 5 khandhas, the 5 aggregates.
Okay. And Rick asks, Venerables, do we need to feel the pain of renouncing sensual comforts so that we're open to letting go of greed and aversion towards the world? Or is it better to discover the joy and happiness found in deep meditation so we can let go of the less satisfying sense world? I don't think it's not painful. Yeah. So rephrase your question. Do we need to feel the joy of renouncing sensual comforts so that we're opening to letting go of greed and aversion towards the world? Yes. Answer is yes. Or is it better to discover the joy and happiness found in deep meditation so we let go of the less satisfying sense in the world? Even better.
Both. Actually, you do both. Because actually, if you want to experience joy and happiness of deep meditation, then you need to first experience the joy and happiness of renouncing sensuality. So renouncing sensuality is the preliminary step. It's actually right in the Buddha's instructions on jhana. The very first instruction the Buddha gives for attaining the very first stage of jhana is renouncing sensuality. That's the very first step. So if you want deep meditation, well, that starts with the bliss of renouncing sensuality. The fact that you think it's pain is an indication of wrong view, by the way. So renouncing sensuality is actually starting to get in touch with contentment. It's starting to get in touch with this wonderful joy of unconditional happiness. The sensuality, addiction to sensuality is a disturbed, agitated, uncomfortable state of mind. Whereas renunciation is a peaceful, sublime, serene state of mind.
Jomo, the joy of missing out. And in fact, it's so funny because sometimes people come and tell me, like, wow, it's just so amazing that, you renounced all these things. I don't know how you managed to do it, or that how you keep holding all these precepts. And I'm like, I don't know how you do it. Being a lay person.
No, it's so stressful.
Yes. Actually, I have a lot of admiration for lay people, especially like after the retreat. I spent some time with some of my friends from my previous life within this life. Now there was a wedding, and Bante came with me. It was really stressful at a certain point. I was like, wow, they like have so many engagements, so much like sensory input, so many things. So I don't know how you can do it. So wow, incredible. Like that's actually like some serious, intense how do you feel the pain of taking on sensual comforts? Really, that's what was crossing my mind. I was like, wow, how do they do it? I'm not used to it anymore. So yeah, I actually am having a great as a monastic.
Yeah, I think there's an Ajahn Mahabua book entitled "Sensual Pleasures Are Painful."
They are, yes. It's difficult. Nanagarigayan?
I was just going to say, maybe they mean, like, for example, quitting smoking, there's still a pain because you want to smoke. It's like that pain of wanting that. And I don't know if that's what they meant. Like that pain of, I've renounced this, but I still want this. I want to go back to this.
Well, that's the pain of craving, not the pain of renunciation. Renunciation is not painful, but craving is painful.
Yes, I know.
Yeah. And it's also just simply habits. We're talking about habits. So, of course, when we have a strong habit, whether it's actually wholesome or unwholesome, to remove that habit, it will be somewhat painful. I mean, if tomorrow, they force me to drink alcohol, it will be very painful for me because now I have a very strong habit of not drinking, right? But back in the day, I used to drink. It was actually not difficult to stop, thanks to my friends who were trying to force me to drink while I was on the 5 precepts, Anumadana Sadhu, to my friends from my previous life within this life. But like for example, quitting smoking, there was still like some craving, as Bante said, and that was painful. But it was just essentially a habit, and that's why really beautiful translation of Sila that really helped me in my practice was exactly, instead of morality, habit. So that's simply what it is. The Buddha gives us good habits, and we replace the bad habits that we have. Or we start identifying the good habits that we have, and we don't throw away the good habits and we replace them with the bad habits, but we just toss what is not kusala, and we develop what is kusala. So essentially what leads to happiness, and we toss suffering. And Christopher has, if I refer to Sutta Nipata 4.12, it also infers the 4 noble truths are not truths. 4 noble truth is merely solution to a problem, the problem of all existence, for example, birth, aging, sickness, and death. Since 4 noble truths solve problems of existence, it can be considered as worldly truth and not ultimate truth.
Okay, Christopher, I'm going to say something to you that I say to pretty much nobody ever. Stop reading the suttas and just do a bunch of meditation. I've literally never said this to anyone before, but this is what you need to hear, I think. Jens is confirming that I've never said this to anyone before. Yeah. You can start reading. You can start reading the suttas again in a couple of years, but you need to stop and just do a bunch of meditation practice.
Maybe some practical would change his thinking habits to feeling, and so the wrong view can set to right.
Exactly.
Noble truth is basically right view, and is certainly in a wrong view world. So
it's too much thinking, and so the problem is that if we're really deeply immersed in generating a lot of speculative views, then sometimes reading the suttas we can just use as fuel for our own speculative views. So, I mean, most people, I think their problem is that they actually don't read the suttas enough. But every now and there's somebody who they really just need to put the books down and meditate. And honestly, Christopher, I think you need to put the books down and meditate. I think that's what's going to be most helpful for you at this time. Mindfulness of the body. Focus on that. Do that for 2 years, and then you can start studying again.
And Michael asks, is one of the goals of the 6 elements practice to look at other people as compilations of the 6 elements, to look at other humans as mounts of earth, fire, water, and air? Well, I would say that the biggest benefit of the 6 elements practice is to actually have a tool to understand our personal experience. So how we are perceiving the world. And that's essentially through these different elements, right? So we tend to have this, actually, it's really paradoxical when one starts practicing, because one realizes that actually the feelings of the body are more of an intellectual idea. Like you can spend years, decades with having an idea of what the body is that is completely disconnected to what the reality of the body is. As a matter of fact, then when we start doing mindfulness of the body without even getting into the elements practice, sometimes we can't even feel parts of the body. Like so many people that, have come, for example, at our meditation retreats and could not feel their hands. Like as if there was a blank spot. Bhante Sudaza was giving the instructions of feel the sensations of your hands. And they're like, well, where are the hands? Right? So there's some complete erasure of different parts of the body. So we start ingraining, we start perceiving them with the elements practice, the solidity of the body, the water elements of the body. Like we start filling up the gaps, but also seeing how we think that this chunk of meat is separate from everything else. But then we start noticing that it's not that sharp of a sort of as how do you say, the confini, the borders are not as sharp as we intellectually perceive them. And so also physics, actually, Western science gives us a lot of intellectual information. For example, that the body is, I think, 70% or 80% water, right? Do we have actually an experience of it being 80% water? Quite the opposite, right? We tend to think of it in a very different way. Or quantum physics, or also just, essentially whenever you're touching something, that the surface sort of things from your body enter there and certain things enter your body. So you're becoming more entwined, in sync with how things are rather than how you think they are. And it's an insight practice that I think is extremely powerful to also develop anatta. Definitely, as far as the body is concerned, that has helped me quite a lot in kind of becoming a little bit more aware that this is just a dependently arisen chunk of things, and it's not very much separated from the rest of my experience, as delusion tends to direct us there. Bhante, do you have anything else?
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah.
Okay, well. Fadze, I hope I'm pronouncing your name properly, says, what is the idea behind not remembering the past incarnation in Buddhism?
I don't understand the question. So
maybe why don't we remember the past lives, like automatically?
I guess you have bad memory. And it's like, well, like, yeah, you asked me what I had for lunch yesterday. I don't know. I know that I did have lunch yesterday, but I couldn't tell you what it was. What did I have for lunch today, for that matter? No, that I can remember. That was pretty recent. But yeah, I mean, if you can't even remember what you ate for lunch yesterday, what makes you think you're going to remember your past lives? But some people do remember their past lives, and some people, as they practice meditation, they start to remember. And actually, it's relatively common for small children to remember fragments of their past lives. And commonly they forget as they become teenagers. Um, so, but what Buddhist practice really emphasizes is understanding the present moment experience. That's actually much more important. So it actually doesn't really matter whether or not you remember what you had for lunch yesterday. What matters is, can you be completely present with the experience of eating lunch today? And can you do so with a mind that is completely pure, completely free of greed, hatred, and delusion? That's much more important than remembering what you had for lunch yesterday. Similarly, living this life as wholesomely and purely as possible, with as much wisdom and compassion as you can, that's much more important than being able to remember the details of your past lives. So we know that there were past lives, but just as we know that we had lunch yesterday. But we don't need to remember the details. It's not critical. But this is one of the things which is like the Buddha could remember his past lives in detail. Arhants, generally speaking, can remember past lives in detail. But it's not something that you necessarily need to do, at least not anytime soon. Maybe later on in your practice, you might start developing that ability. But for the time being, it's much more important to learn how to be completely present and pure in the present moment. Not worry so much about remembering the distant past. Okay.
Thank you, Bante.
Sometimes it's often mentioned not to get into those things because it also like brain throws false images. So falling
Mhm.
into the wrong views also a tendency of the mind.
Yeah.
Right. And Christopher says, thoughts arise by itself. No. No, thoughts are dependently arisen. As with everything is dependently arisen. So your job is to find the causes and conditions for whatever you're experiencing that is not really helpful. So that you can actually put other causes and conditions to get better results. And so, for example, one of the things that if you go to a monastery and you stop, for example, listening to music, the first thing that you start noticing is that there will thoughts of music will arise by itself, as you say, over and over again, until at a certain point, if you stay long enough, it will stop. So it's not that, all of a sudden the thought decided to stop arising by itself. It's just that you stopped feeding it. You stopped creating the conditions in order to germinate to begin with. And you planted different seeds that had a different result, which is peace, quiet, calm. And that's how you become, instead of enslaved from the mind, you start actually going, I'm in charge. I'm the boss here. Do I want peacefulness or do I want agitation? Do I want to constantly have Lady Gaga in my mind or do I want to actually have metta? I'll go for metta. Thank you very much. With the side of mudita. All right. And the Shadow Label goes, if you guys don't eat meat, where do you get all the essential proteins that are only in meats? Do you guys eat spirulina or something, as it has all the essential proteins and amino acids?
I think you're a little confused in that first you say that there are nutrients which are only in meat, and then in the next line you admit that actually you can get them from non-meat sources. So I think you're a little confused about how nutrition works. But briefly speaking, it is possible to have a completely nutritious vegetarian diet, but you do need to be a little bit careful to make sure that you're feeding your body properly. But actually, to be honest, even omnivorous humans often aren't feeding their bodies correctly. I know lots of people who eat meat all the time, yet they're very unhealthy. So eating meat is not necessarily a cure-all. No matter what kind of diet you have, whether it's omnivorous or vegetarian or vegan, you actually do need to think about what's properly nourishing your body. So yeah, it is possible to have a completely nourishing vegetarian diet for most people. Not everyone. There is a small percentage of people who their bodies don't seem to function properly on a strictly vegetarian diet, but it's not everyone. It's only a small percentage of people. Most people can be vegetarian.
Thank you. And Hawk says, is there only one Samasambuddha in all of the universe, or is there a Samasambuddha for each individual world system?
Well, there's different opinions on this. So it all comes down to how one defines a particular Pali term, what's commonly translated as world system. So we know that in the suttas it says there's only one Samasambuddha in each world system at each time. But what is a world system? How big is a world system? Is a world system one planet, one solar system, one galaxy, one galactic cluster, one galactic supercluster, one universe? How big is a world system? It's not clearly defined anywhere in the suttas that I'm aware of. I don't think even the Mahayana literature goes into detail on this particular point. So there's different opinions about how big a world system is. So there might be some Buddhas in other solar systems or other galaxies. It's possible. Definitely other universes for sure, but possibly also other places in this universe. Kind of beside the point, isn't it? Because you're not there, you're here. So it's kind of irrelevant.
All right, thank you. And Christopher says, we can't choose our thoughts thinking. Thought arises without our thinking. Meaning, it is not free will but determinism. Meaning, thoughts arise due to the presence of necessary conditions.
So, Christopher, as I said, stop thinking and do a bunch of meditation, specifically mindfulness of the body. So the determinism, by the way, is wrong view. Buddhism does not teach determinism. Buddhism teaches wholesome decision. And the wholesome decision you need to make is to do a bunch of mindfulness of the body meditation with metta. So thoughts are something you can choose. So through Buddhism, actually the Dvaita Vitakka Sutta, the Buddha is extremely clear on this point. The Dvaita Vitakka Sutta is all about the Buddha saying how you can choose your thoughts and how what you constantly choose to think eventually becomes the tendency of the mind. So in other words, the reason why you're having all these thoughts arising now is because of what you've done with your mind in the past. So if you do something else with your mind for a while, then the habits of the mind will change. The patterns of the mind will change, as Ayasoma was saying earlier. So that can resemble determinism, but in actuality, it's free will because you're making choices in every moment. Okay.
Thank you. And Kumu says, to feel/see the Dhamma, we lay down our knowledge-based learning, degrees and letters in front and letters after the name, and pay attention to what we feel and watch our thoughts. True/false, I would say true/tralls, in the sense that I would say that, but they didn't like that. I would say that yes, we lay down the degrees, etc., and the letters in front of the name. But aside from paying attention to what we feel and watch our thoughts, I mean, we really need to have right view. So we need to have the understanding of the teachings of the Buddha, at least intellectually first, and map them out, constantly compare them. Otherwise, if we just sit down and pay attention to what we feel and watch our thoughts, well, those thoughts can be very crazy, and then they can pull us away, and we can have all sorts of wrong views arising from that. So it's very important to have the map, you know. Well, even though we kind of intellectually understand that we have to go to Canada, you know, we can see the map. We don't throw the map straight away. We keep following the map until we reach Canada. We don't go like, oh yeah, well, I'll just be present with the road. and the bridges and, the thoughts that appear while I'm looking at the directions. No, then we see the rainbow and we're like, oh, yeah, I think the rainbow is going to like lead me to a nice destination. So that's why, yes, but also no. I mean, throw away what is not necessary and attach yourself to the Dhamma. Actually, that's what the Buddha, in the Trigatha, since we're talking about the Trigatha a lot these days, the instructions that he has given to so many disciples and definitely a lot of the Teris is bind yourself to the Dhamma, like attach yourself to the Dhamma. So it's not true that we have to, like, for example, let go of everything immediately. We actually need to attach to something, which is the Dhamma, like right there, like hold it really tightly. And then we will, it's a simile of the raft, essentially. Yeah. We only get rid of the raft once we are reach the farther shore. We don't let it go beforehand. And Rick says, I experience joy of renouncing many things and feel content. However, reach out for food to comfort myself when intense pain is overwhelming. Chronic life-altering pain and illness at times is more than my mind can bear. Do you have a comment, Bante?
Yeah, well, I'm sorry that you have this ongoing chronic pain issue. We've mentioned this in previous live streams as well. And so this is your practice. Your practice is to learn how to continue developing wholesome mind states while practicing equanimity in the face of this ongoing pain. And sometimes it is going to be overwhelming. And sometimes you're going to find other ways of dealing with it. And that's to be expected because we're still unawakened beings. Our restraint is not yet perfect. Our wisdom is not yet perfect. But we keep practicing and we keep trying because we're playing the long game. So we're not trying to attain absolute perfection right in this moment. I mean, that'd be really disappointing. It's like, let's see, Arhat in this moment. No, I'm such a failure. Let's try again. Arhat. Nope. Such a failure. No, it's a long game. You're gradually developing the wholesome states and gradually diminishing the unwholesome states. So, okay, so every once in a while, the pain is too much and you indulge in food. Okay. And remind yourself of all the good things you do. Don't just fixate on the times when you make mistakes, but remind yourself of all the goodness that you're developing. And that will help keep you going forward.
Thank you, Bante. So it would be really great to just
so far, my success rate is 0 on that one.
Yeah, it didn't work for me this time around. I'll try again. Yeah, 2000. Maybe that's where the prostration comes from. Arhat. Okay, so Jordan says, I have a best friend who lives in another state and wants me to move over to live. I'm sad to say that he is not someone who practices wholesome actions. I'm reluctant to move. What is your advice? Yes, don't move. It's very simple. Then we have to be realistic. So in Italian we say chi va con lo zoppo impara a zoppicare. So if you go with the person, that stumbles, then you start stumbling too. And the Buddha says Kalyanamita is the entire path. So essentially the opposite, the flip side. Whoever a good spiritual friend is the entire path, because we want to actually surround ourselves with people who are ahead of us in the path, or at least at the same point in the path, and most importantly with the same objective, so that then we can help each other along the path. Otherwise, we can have the best intentions, but most likely we're going to drown too. If we don't know how to swim and the person is not interested, is drowning and is not interested in coming out, most likely they will just hold on to us and get us to drown with them. So actually by perhaps keeping some distance and cultivating wholesome qualities of mind, then actually you can be an inspiration for the person to do something different with their lives. And then who knows, maybe in the future, then you can actually become Kalyanamitas. But right now, clearly that's not the case. And Sud says, do you have any advice as to what suttas should a layperson recite daily as a reminder to help advance in the Dhamma?
Yeah, actually, the Buddha recommended the 5 daily recollections. So this is 5 things to constantly remind ourselves of. And he actually says whether you're a layperson or a monastic, you should constantly remind yourself of these 5 things. So I definitely recommend that one. So I'm of the nature to become decrepit. I'm of the nature to get sick. I'm of the nature to die. Everything I love will change and be lost. And I will receive the consequences of all of my choices. These are 5 things that we need to constantly remind ourselves of. I also recommend reciting the 3 refuges, 5 precepts, especially now that you've taken them formally. You should constantly remind yourself of your commitment. And the recollection of Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, so Itipiso, Bhagava, Arahang, etc. These are all good things to recite every day. Otherwise, as you're reading through the suttas, if you find one that you really like and it just really is really inspirational for you, well, then you can add that to your recitations. And you might eventually start compiling your own personal chanting book, the Sudamshu chanting, like your own personal collection of suttas you like to recite.
Thank you, Bhante. And Shadow of Label says, what are Buddhist views on anti-aging sciences? For example, a lady went through an experimental process at 63, and scientists did something to turn her skin back to the age of 23. She's still gonna die. She's gonna die with less wrinkles, but what is the purpose? I think less wrinkles and more delusion. Give me more wrinkles and less delusion. So yeah, I don't know if we waste so much time in samsara trying to once again fight the inevitable and also not look once again at actually the contemplations that Bhante just encouraged, in the chants that we do, the recollections, that we're of the nature to get sick, we're of the nature to age, we're of the nature to die. So we actually put so much effort in pretending that we are healthy, pretending that we are forever youthful, pretending that we're not going to die. So it just creates more and more suffering and more delusion, and you're still going to die, and you're still going to get old, and you're still going to get sick. And actually a lot of people, I would say that, I still yet have to see anyone that has sort of passed away in an inspiring way, for example, by focusing so much on the anti-aging sciences. But on the other hand, a few weeks ago, one of our lay friend supporters from the Thai community sent me this amazingly beautiful video that I think it's the most beautiful video I've ever seen, of a Thai old woman passing away in Thailand. And there's a bhikkhu, a Thai bhikkhu, that is chanting while she's passing away, and her face is so peaceful and blissful. She's not a monastic; she's just a regular lay person, but she's also chanting with him, and she's just there, just no fear, no agitation, no regret, no remorse. Just by talking about it, actually, I just got goosebumps. And I was like, how incredible, how inspiring, how beautiful. In that moment, I realized, wow, actually, even the moment of death can be a really beautiful moment if you have cultivated the right conditions. And she was, what an excellent daughter of the Buddha. Incredible. So inspiring. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Yeah, so I would say, do I want to invest in anti-aging sciences, or do I want to invest in anti-suffering sciences? So I'll pick the latter.
It's not like people think that others would age, become ill, and die.
Yeah.
That's the thing that's happening.
Yeah, exactly. Sayalaya is reflecting that we constantly think everybody else is dying, everybody else is aging, everybody else is getting sick. And then we're so surprised when it happens to us. No? We're like, oh, I got a wrinkle. What happened? Oh, like my foot doesn't work anymore. Wait, what happened?
My hairline.
Yes. Yeah, so we are constantly in this state of agitation and craziness, and we die confused. So, not really great.
Excuse me, I think this lady, maybe she listened to Dhamma a lot. That Dhamma said that, this is the old body, like an old house. Why don't you go up there? Go up to the new house, a beautiful house there. That's why she's so ready to go. That's why she's not fear of dying. Because they say that this body is so old body, decaying. You don't see well, you don't hear well, you don't eat well. Why don't you go up there? After that, maybe she's been doing a lot of merit. That's why she believe in that she going to the right place, to the beautiful.
Right, because there's thank you, I am. Yes, there's the understanding of karma and vipaka, and there's the understanding of the afterlife. So essentially, there's the understanding of right view. So when there is no understanding, when there is instead wrong view, then one does lots of evil actions usually in their lives, and then has lots of anxiety and lots of remorse, because that they're in a state of suffering. But when one actually has right view, then they will make so many good actions that then will lead naturally to peacefulness right here, right now, knowing also that it leads to a good destination. It's a good destination now and in the future. And in fact, also in the suttas, it's really beautiful, actually. The Buddha, whenever he's called at the sort of, if someone is sick and going through a lot of pain, whether they're monastics or lay people, the first questions that he asks are always like, do you have any remorse on your conduct? Is there anything that troubles you? And they all, of course, are very good disciples of his. And they're like, no, that's not. Pretty great.
Example, myself, I used to be afraid of dying, so afraid. But since I enter into the, it's the monkhood, I'm ready to go anywhere, and ready to go because I know that I have something good, nice up there, or never come back here again. Nibbana, they're going to Nibbana, because I'm ready. Everything I give to my son, I give to my husband, everything. I have no more worried about it. I can die anytime now.
Oh, that's great. Sadhu.
Sadhu.
I will admit, actually, that I'm a little bit terrified by death. Actually, I'm not terrified by death. I'm terrified by rebirth. Once I started understanding rebirth, I was like, oh dear. Having to go through it all over again, and maybe not having the Dhamma straight away, like this time around, us, because I think that's one difference. Because Asian Buddhists are born with the Dhamma, as opposed to we're not. So we remember in this lifetime how horrible it was to be without the Dhamma. So that generally gives me a sense of urgency of like, oh dear. Yeah, also going into a Deva realm, also, oh dear, that's terrible, because then I know that I'm going to have a great time there. And then, bam.
That's why we have to keep on practicing.
Yeah, practicing now.
It may take us 7 days, 7 months, 7 years, or 7 months.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, however long it takes, but let's try and do it now.
Right. We get there. Okay? We get there.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And Niranjan asks, knowledge of 5 aggregates is not enough to know anatta? Okay.
I know, it depends on what you mean by knowledge. If you mean intellectual knowledge, then no, definitely not. If you mean just attention, then also no, that's not enough. But if by knowledge you mean the direct awareness of anicca, dukkha, anatta, then that's correct. So when paying attention to body and mind, do you clearly see that this body-mind is not me, not mine, not myself? That's anatta. Anatta is seeing this body the same way you look at somebody else's body. Actually, a very interesting practice of anatta is to sit next to another person and you both put out your hand. And you look at the other person's hand, and there's a very clear sense, that's not me, that's not mine, that's not my hand. So then turn your attention to your own hand and try to keep that same perception. This is not me, this is not my hand. It's just a piece of meat. That is just a piece of meat, not me, not mine. This, it's just a piece of meat, not me, not mine. Yeah, so you notice how your mind keeps creating a difference. It keeps perceiving that as not self and this as self. But actually, from the perspective of nature, it's all the same. It's just a talking piece of meat. That's all. But we have this delusion of atta, which gets in the way.
Maybe Bante, if you want to take this one as well. Steve asks, when I'm meditating, it gets to a place where I'm aware I have a body but can't feel it. Breath almost vanished and is very slow. Then I can't remember where I am and I can't get past that. Any tips? Thank you.
So this is actually really bad. So this is not a sign of progress. This is a sign that your mindfulness is becoming very weak. So come back to feeling your body very intensely and clearly. So the disappearance of the body is usually a bad sign. It's usually not a good sign. And especially that you say you can't remember where you are and such. That's also not a good sign. So be clearly, intensely aware of your body. As if your body was the most fascinating thing in the whole world, the most interesting thing imaginable. Don't let it fade away. There's a time and a place for that, but I don't think you're there. So intense awareness of the body leads to samadhi. And in samadhi practice, then the mind is ready to start to see the impermanent nature of the body, but you're still seeing the impermanent nature of the body. So there's still awareness of the body. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Do you want to also take this one? How do I use the deathless element to practice the jhanas?
You don't. No.
Okay. And then I'll give you also this one because that was too short. For Michael asks, for 1 minute out of every hour, I usually do 1 minute of mindfulness. Do you have any thoughts about how to cultivate samadhi in 1 minute of mindfulness every hour?
Well, for one thing, congratulations on doing 1 minute out of every hour. That's much better than nothing, but you should really try to do every minute of the hour. Try to do 60 minutes of mindfulness of every hour. Be completely aware at all times. Basically, anytime you're not sleeping, you should be intensely, powerfully aware of this body-mind. Unless you mean you do 1 minute of meditation out of every hour, which is great, actually. That's a good practice, especially if you're a lay person. Take 1 minute out of every hour during your job, for example, to just sit and focus on your body for a minute. That's a great practice. But you're not going to get any samadhi in 1 minute. I mean, you're just barely getting started. So your samadhi, you'll only have the tiniest fraction of samadhi in 1 minute. Realistically, anything less than 30 minutes, you're not going to get much samadhi. Even if you're really good at meditating, it's hard to get good samadhi in a few minutes. Just be realistic. You're not going to get samadhi under those conditions. But practicing mindfulness is good enough for now. And then later on, when you can meditate for longer periods of time, then you can get some samadhi.
Okay, thank you, Bhante. Ankita says, how can one help a family member that has wrong view, especially if the individual clings to their wrong view? Well, I would say that usually we try to address these things intellectually. At least I have, definitely, with family members. And unsurprisingly, 0 results, right? And that's because we're approaching it intellectually with sort of I am right, you're wrong kind of thing. And when we approach it that way, we're actually not practicing the Dhamma. Simple as that. So we're trying to convince someone about the Dhamma that we are not practicing. It's kind of like trying to convince someone to be vegetarian while eating steak. It's not really convincing, is it? So after 7 years of trying unsuccessfully that technique over and over again with my parents, yesterday they came to visit the monastery, and the Sayalays here, as well as our lay resident Tineri, who did not have the unuseful tool of speaking the same language of my parents, did not have the obstruction, were actually able to practice the Dhamma. And it was incredible. Each one of them was, really, actually every single member of the community was, just practicing the Dhamma, acting out of the Dhamma. And my parents were able to see a glimpse of the Dhamma and have incredibly, it's a miracle. In 24 hours, they're like, they stopped disapproving of what I'm doing. My mom even said, yes, it's incredible. They managed to repay my parents on my behalf. I can't take the credit for this. So actually, probably they are going to, they're going to the good destination, as I was saying. I still have to work hard. But yeah, it was. They also taught me, they taught me what I was doing wrong. Even though intellectually I also knew it, I was still like, no, I'm sure it's the wrong view, right? I'm sure that this time around it's going to work. But instead, what a beautiful teaching of actually just practicing the Dhamma and inspiring others with that the real language of Dhamma, which is not words, which is not books, which is not philosophy, which is not like 3 characteristics, blah blah 1, 2, 3, the 5 precepts, the Noble Eightfold Path, being all kind of I'll teach you, mom and dad, but rather actually really acting in that way. What an incredible transformation. So let's focus more on our practice, and that and everything else kind of comes into order by itself.
And many years ago, my preceptor said, you don't win them over through logic, you win them over through kindness.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
My experience with my father was really, we had a friction, but when I understood that it's just a perception, he was right on his part, I was right on my part, and it was just the karma and our choices of acting. And we were just struggling on one topic. With this view, everything was very easy.
Yeah.
So there was never again a wrong view or any friction between us.
Sadhu. Yeah, it's very good when we have these realizations, and then actually, we experientially understand the Dhamma rather than getting stuck with our thoughts and ideas. And Rick goes, Venerables, what do you find especially inspiring in your current Dhamma practice? Bhante?
Well, I mean, I'm always inspired by the Buddha, but that's kind of been an ongoing thread. I find especially inspiring in my current Dhamma practice. To be perfectly honest, Anagarika Jens. Because he's quite new to monastic life, but he has such a deep desire to be trained, such a deep desire to make progress in the path. It's really remarkable. I haven't seen this in actually, I can't think of anyone I've seen it so well developed in. It's a really remarkable trait.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. What I find especially inspiring in my current Dhamma practice, my Kalyanamitta friends here at Empty Cloud Monastery, including Anagarika Jens, but not excluding everyone else. Not that you were excluding them, but oops.
everyone except Bante.
No. Yeah, I actually really love everybody here in this room. They are very inspiring to me. Yeah, every moment. I really love the international monastery quality of Empty Cloud right now. Constantly learning. I never take anything for granted, or at least there's more to think about and to learn about. So yeah, I think I'm growing in Dhamma, so I'm very, very happy and inspired by everyone. So thank you. And Christopher says, all right, noted that you have never recommended someone not to read the suttas.
Good.
But then he quotes the sutta. The Vimutta Yatana Sutta presents 5 different ways whereby the mind can be cultivated to reach liberation. The 5 grounds for liberation are: 1, listening to the Dhamma; 2, teaching the Dhamma; 3, reciting the Dhamma; 4, reflecting the Dhamma; 5, meditation.
Yeah, so it's time for you to do number 5.
All right. And Jordan says, I'm not progressing in my meditation practice. I've had a few beautiful moments in the last years, but even when consistently practicing the 5 precepts, I don't have much progress.
Well, you might consider trying different meditation techniques. I recommend consulting with some meditation monks, asking them, tell them what you're doing and ask them for advice. I recommend speaking to a few different monks. So don't just go off what one tells you, but consult with several and see what they each have to recommend, and try out their advice and see what helps. Sometimes it's just we're using a style of meditation that's not really good for us, and it's time to do something different. But sometimes it's also about expectation. Sometimes we're expecting particular results, or we're expecting quick results, and the truth is it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes progress is very slow and gradual. And sometimes there's sudden breakthroughs, but sometimes there's not. So sometimes it actually is just a matter of just keep practicing, and the results come slowly in time. So those are my thoughts. Consider trying out different methods and getting advice from teachers, but also accept that this is a long, slow process. And results are usually not quick or dramatic.
Thank you. And Sud says, if one is not successful in achieving any realizations at the time of death, how does one make sure that one will encounter Dhamma in future lives? By worrying about it before being at the time of death. So right now, associating with the wise. So associating with, developing a keen, affiliation with the Dhamma, keen interest in the teachings. So yeah, everything that you do essentially has to revolve around Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. It doesn't matter that you're a lay person. Actually, even more so if you're a lay person. Put it as the foremost. So essentially, you want to replace the TV with an altar of the Buddha. And put the supreme. Yes, exactly. There's no flat screen TV here. Actually, there used to be at the very beginning. We removed them all and put altars instead. Altars of that represent the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, the jewels, the foremost. And that, of course, creates, the momentum that propels us to our destination. We can see it right here, right now, like whatever we cultivate, if we start cultivating the habit of drinking, then most likely we'll be with others that are drinking, because that's essentially what happens. It's not that people who don't drink all of a sudden appear and like, oh yeah, you're so fun to hang out with, you sober person. Like, right. So we attract essentially what we are, what we're a magnet towards. So whatever we cultivate. All right, and Anthony, I think that's the last question. And I think it was great. Do you remember the question from Anthony? Now the follow-up. There is a discourse that says one, I can't believe.
About using the deathless element to enter jhana.
Okay.
Well, actually, Anthony, you're coming to the monastery soon, so how about we discuss that when you're here at the monastery?
Okay.
I think that's better than giving an answer over the internet.
Okay, great.
And I think the rest of these questions will need to wait for...
There are only two.
Okay.
Let's do it, Bhante. Anjan says, I'm in a state of grief after my wife's tragic and untimely death. I am not being able to meditate. Is there any non-meditation practice that can help me get better? Oh, I'm so sorry to hear. Bhante, would you like to share?
Well, honestly, at this time, this is an opportunity to really become intimately familiar with grief. So not trying to ignore it or sweep it away, but just really allowing yourself to be present. What does it feel like? It's completely natural. There's someone who was very precious to you that was a big part of your life for probably a fair amount of time, and they're suddenly gone. So naturally, you're going to be having a lot of grief. So that's nothing to be ashamed of. It's nothing to be disturbed by. But it is an opportunity to really understand the mind and understand how emotion works. So allow the grief to flow through the mind and watch it as it flows through the mind. And notice that grief is impermanent. It's constantly changing. And also notice that it's conditional. There's particular causes and conditions which are causing this emotion to arise. And that means it's not who you really are. It's just a temporary experience which is happening. So in this way, you're both honoring the emotion that's arising based upon a perfectly understandable condition, and you're also developing the wisdom of seeing anicca and anatta. And be patient with yourself, because this is a difficult process that you're going through. It's going to be quite challenging. And ask for help from other people. Be honest with them that you're having a difficult time and you really need help. And if you have good friends and caring family members in your life, then they'll help you.
Thank you, Bhante. And wishing you all the best, Anjan. We'll dedicate the chanting for you tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
And Brian says, what is the difference between Sill and Vinaya? The last question for tonight. Bhante, do you want to address it? So,
briefly speaking, we normally use these words that Sila means morality or good habits, as Ayasama was saying. And Vinaya we normally use to mean the monastic rules. But as I mentioned in a recent Dhamma talk, Vinaya also can be used in a more broad sense to mean the training practices which we do in Buddhism, whether you're a monastic or a lay person.
Okay. All right, and I think that's all for this evening. Thank you all for joining us tonight. And if you're around Empty Cloud Monastery physically, this weekend we will be having lots of different programs at the monastery. So tomorrow is the Upasada, so there will be an entire day long here that you're welcome to attend. So from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. And actually our resident Sayalay Gotami will be leading it. So very special opportunity to learn from a really lovely Indian monastic here staying at Empty Cloud. And then on Sunday, we will have a regular program. So you're welcome to come here also essentially anytime from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Except that we will start doing our meditation program at 1 p.m. To 4 p.m. So our friend Christopher should come from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. for the meditation part. Absolutely. All right. And but you're welcome. Kidding. You're welcome to come for all of it. Shadow Labo asks, will there be cake? Well, definitely we can't make the cake, but
if you bring cake, there will be cake.
Yeah, my mom is bringing cake.
Oh.
You're very lucky because Tineri's mother is apparently bringing cake. So if Tineri's mom is bringing cake, then it will be cake. Otherwise, well, there will be joy of missing out. All right. So either see you this weekend or we'll see you next week. Well, not with us because we will be somewhere else, but there will be other monastics that will be joining here our live streams. All right. We can end with 3 sadhus.
Sadhu, sadhu.